Hey everybody, and welcome back to our continued video series on API simulation. Today I've got a good one for you. Today I wanted to show you some of the advanced functionality that's been recently released in API simulation's learning mode. Before we get started with that though, I want to just a quick refresher for everyone on what learning mode is. And actually, let's start one step back. For those of you who are new to this video series, we've been talking about how to use API simulation to create mock versions of APIs when you're doing your testing so that you can stub out environments that are unavailable, unstable, or don't have the proper behavior or test data. And while that's cool, learning how to build the services can be a little intimidating at first. And so we've added some functionality quite a long time ago to simulation so that it automatically learned these services. We did this a lot in the early days of the generative AI story because we had a lot of our users that were stubbing out their LLMs to reduce costs, to make it more predictive, etc. But that can be expanded for any type of learning. And so let me explain how it works. When you have an application, such as, let's just say in this particular case, a chatbot, that app will communicate with OpenAI, probably through some kind of an API. Simulation gets in between that app and the back-end system, and it allows you to sort of redirect the traffic, monitor, and record. This has the advantage of teaching you how some of the API calls work in the back end, but we can also use this later to create virtual services. The simulator itself has a couple of different modes. For longtime viewers, I know we've gone over this a couple of times, but the primary use case of these modes are things like failover and simulate first. And the idea is that you can go to either the live service or the virtual service, depending upon different conditions, things that are in the request, the time of day, whatever you want. And this allows you to make environmental configuration changes once, and then just use the connection to redirect traffic whenever you want. One of the things we can do, though, is something called learning. And how learning works is that connection waits for something to come in, forwards it to the simulation engine first. It looks to see if there's a response there, and if there isn't, then it goes and it forwards it to the real service. And then it gets a response. Why is this beneficial? Well, because you can then learn that response and automatically create a virtual service so that the next time that call goes through, it's served up by a simulated response. As I mentioned before, we have a really great video for this that I'll put a link in the comments to about how we do this with generative AI, which is a massive value save. But I want to show you some of the more advanced functionality that we can do on top of that. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start up a real quick simulator. I'm just going to do a Windows one. We'll do Docker here in a second. That will start up my sim. This is basically just starting that little connection here on my machine. And I'm just going to record some quick traffic from my chatbot. So over here, I have my chatbot, and this is then communicating over an endpoint where it should be going to my OpenAI, but instead it's going here to this port 1444, Docker internal, which my connection is listening on, and it's forwarding a hit to this endpoint. So basically I'm capturing and sending traffic, and of the 4 states that I'm in pass-through, so it's just passing through me. Let's test it out. So we'll go in here and we'll just say, hi. And so now this is going to send a call basically through me to that endpoint, and we see that it's responding back. Now, in the other demo that I do, what I then do is put this into learning mode. Now, let's dig in a little bit. What's happening when it goes into learning mode? The first thing is, once I save, that it's going to evaluate the traffic against these patterns. Patterns are essentially pre-correlated identifiers that the engine is going to look for in requests and responses that go through the system, through the connection, so that it can make a virtual service with the right triggers. A trigger basically identifies why one service should respond over another. And in this case, I'm saying that when the traffic goes through you, in this case, I want you to look at the path. I want you to look at the API version, which is a query. I want you to look at the last role and the last content that goes through, and also temperature. These are very OpenAI specific learning points. And I will provide this sample YAML to you if you also are simulating your LLM. This will cover 99% of what you want to do with your service, and it will also capture the right points. So let's see this in action. So I'm currently learning, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, I'm going to ask the engine something. Tell me a joke. This is my favorite part of the demonstration because generative AI tells the worst jokes. And so here comes our joke. And our joke says, why did the API get kicked off the party bus? Because it kept throwing 404 errors. That's an awful joke, but it makes you laugh. What's happened though? If I click over here in the simulator, check it out. I just learned something. I just learned this service. And this service is basically saying that if the 4.0 many completions with a query in this version and this and the value tell me a joke ever comes through, then I'm going to respond with this payload. And here it is. Why did the API get kicked off the party bus? Because it kept throwing 404 errors. Now, I'm just going to change this response just so that we know it's coming from simulation. I'm just going to say sim. And also, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to tell it that these tokens are no longer important because it's not actually using tokens anymore. Now it's just getting a simulated response. We'll save over here. And now, without doing anything, I'll just send that request again. Tell me a joke. See how fast that was? And the reason is because it's not going to OpenAI anymore. Now it's going directly to the simulator and getting a response back. Sim, and we see that our cost has flattened. And if I were to ask it this question again, it's going to give me that response. It automatically learns the responses. And if I had another one, let's just copy this, tell me a joke, and I'll put this in here. Tell me a new joke. It's going to think for a second. The response is going to come back. Why did the RESTful API break up with the SOAP API? Because it couldn't handle the baggage. I don't know. Okay. Let's come into the service now. And now we'll see that we have another learned service. So here was our first one. Here's our second one. Tell me a new joke. And here's our new joke. And so if you can imagine, the more you use this, the smarter it gets, the easier it creates the services, the more responses that you'll have over time. Okay, but there's a lot more that this learning mode can do, and that's sort of the point of this demonstration. So I'm gonna shut down my chatbot. Okay, let me take you through some more advanced use cases here. And so what I'm going to do real quick is I am just going to start up a Docker container here. You don't have to use Docker. You could use the Windows or Mac or Linux version. I'm just doing this so that I can make it easy to destroy after the fact. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just jump here into this guy. And there we go. Here's my simulator. Okay. I am going to upload some simulations. I have a bunch of examples sitting here. And there's just a whole bunch of stuff that this does. We'll just pull these out of source control and let's just start kind of talking through that. Okay. So, this learning connection, this is really important. This learning connection and the associated patterns with it give you all sorts of intelligence when sending a message through to trigger on patterns in the request. For all of these, I also have a little contract test. If you're unfamiliar with the contract testing engine and API simulation, check out the contract testing demonstration. Essentially, it's just a code level API test that goes out, and I have one in each one of my connections to test the connection. So in this case, I'm going to send a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to send some headers. I'm going to send a key. A query, a header here. I'm going to send some queries down here. I'm going to send a payload and a method. And all those are interesting for me to then trigger on in my virtual service. And so what you'll notice here is within my patterns section, I have defined a whole bunch of different things, a connection, the query, a path. And you're not specifically saying the value, you're saying the identifier of it. And you're saying every time you see a different path or you see a different method, go ahead and create that as a new trigger point. So the net is that when I throw traffic through this, it's all going to come into whatever I've named the service, whatever I want the service to be named. And you'll notice I don't have that service, so I'll make it. This is where the contract becomes important. So I'm going to go over to play here, and we're going to go to the all patterns, and I'm just going to drive this through my simulation, or through my learning connection. We'll hit play, we get a response. Let's go back to inventory. Ta-da! Oh, here's a virtual service. Now, just like the generative AI one, this one has been made specifically to look at the connection, like specifically what connection came through, a query, the path, headers, and if it sees that, then it sends this response. And so while I don't recommend just creating these archetypal patterns, right, because every service is unique, and based on the connection, you want to give it different criteria, this is a really nice way to get started, creating a service that is unique to whatever call you just made. And if I were to change the path or the payload or anything like that, I'd get another step, just like I did with generative AI. But let's keep going. What else can we do with this? Well, I want to talk about sorting. So Magic the Gathering, I love to death. It has an API. If you haven't checked out the Magic the Gathering API, it's super cool, and it looks like it's down today. So I guess we're not going to use that one. Would have been an awesome opportunity for a simulated service. I'm going to leave this in the YouTube just to say that environments are unpredictable, and this is why we have simulation. Imagine if I actually had some critical functionality I need to verify. What I was going to show you was our sorting algorithm. We have 3 different sorting algorithms. We can sort the requests that we see by connection, by path, or by timestamp. And what that means is that the services that get created can then be categorized and sorted according to these 3 criteria. Everything goes into a specific service by connection name, or it filters all properly according to the path. In this case, I was doing by path because the Magic the Gathering API has a whole bunch of different paths that you can use. Cards, cards ID, sets ID. And each one of those would have created a different virtual service with different triggers, etc., etc. I'm sure this isn't going to work, but I'm just going to try it anyways, just to see if maybe the API is up. Who knows? And so let's try cards. Maybe we get a response. Sweet! So the API is up, it's just their landing page that isn't. Okay, so I got the full list of cards. Boy howdy, big list. All right, let's go to the second one, cards ID. Now what I'm doing is I'm requesting a specific card by ID. In this case, 386116, which is Narset Enlightened Master. But let's go in here and just do 717. Lots of magic cards in the world. This one gives me War Name Aspirant. It's a cool sounding card. Anyways, 2 different requests for that, and the variation was in 1 path segment. Let's look up sets. In sets, it'll just give you every Magic the Gathering set that exists. 10th edition, Phyrexia, Ice Age, whatever. And then you can look up a set by a specific ID. And I'm going to look up my favorite, which is Ice Age. There we go. And so there's the Ice Age extension when it was released, etc., etc. Okay, lots of traffic just went through my connection in learning mode. What did it make? So let's go back to inventory, learn services, and look at this. So now what I have is a hierarchical representation of all the different calls. So they were all MTG v1s, but sets looked like this with the Ice Age endpoint. Cards looked like this, and then cards also had cards/ID, which gave us this one, and then sets had the full sets request. And this is really nice because now you're creating virtual services that are categorized according to how the path segments are arranged with the API. This just makes it easier to update and to own and to manage instead of everything being smushed into one file, which is quite nice. Okay, I'm glad that worked. But let's look at a couple other examples. So form URL encoded messages. So you'll see this a lot, where your payload is actually a form URL encoded string. You can learn that too. And so a specific syntax that you'd want to use here is type form URL encoded. And by hitting Control Space anytime in a simulation, you can see all the different things that you can do. And so in this particular case, I'm saying in the form, look for item, size, quantity, extras. And so just like before, when I click on this form learning and I send a request, I'm going to get a response. And when I come back here into my inventory and I look at my form service, I'll see that each one of those values is filled in, which means that if I were to send this request again, we'll say this is Sim Coffee. Save. I'll just send that request again for the form endpoint. And there we go. I'm getting a response back, Sim Coffee. Learning mode is really powerful. It really gets you going. Now, in order to keep this video from going infinitely, I'm just going to sort of talk through some of these other functions that we have. Specifically, if you're sending binary encoded data, we will identify that and we will automatically create base64 representations of that in both the header trigger and in the response. And then if you are sending something specifically as a query, you can use this query motion, or if you have a parameter, you can do that as well, looking at specific elements within your message. There's a lot more to this. To me, I think the biggest takeaway is that sit down and think about, for your traffic, what would be good things to look at. Remember, you can always delete everything and relearn the traffic as it goes back through the system. But what you will get from this is a nice set of virtual services automatically created and tailored to your business API's expectation. This should allow you to create more simulations faster and get out of those troublesome environments and test more freely. I hope you enjoyed this content. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and happy testing. We'll talk to you again in the next one.